Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show, Week 11 Recap Edition. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great. It is a great day to break down all of Sunday's eventful action. And I actually mean that this time around. Dwain McFarland joining me as always. Dwain, it was a more fun Sunday than last week. We can say that.
It was a great Sunday. My dog, Nora, she's nervous. She's trying to get in here with me because my wife has been in there yelling at the TV because Patrick Mahomes just lost. So when we yell at the TV about football, our dog gets so nervous and she starts like looking for like a place to like hide. So she was trying to come in here and join the show, Hartitz, but I wouldn't let her.
I had my lovely 6-pound miniature dachshund Deborah, goes by Bruh, get off her leash in the backyard today and go try to chase down the neighbor's dog as I was trying to watch Red Zone. So that was a great, got to touch some grass, not exactly under my own plans, but, we will watch the film and get better and buy a new harness to avoid that in the future. But enough of that, everyone. We know why you're here. It's for the utilization, for the recap, and hopefully some good vibes along the way. And Dwain, let's get right into it with the fantasy performance of the day, at least. Took place in the Saints beat down over the Browns 35-14. New Orleans closed as 1-point home dog. Surprisingly, the over did cash at 44. It is Taysom Hill's world, and we are all just living in it. Dwain, 41.5 fantasy points, the most by a tight end this year. 3 touchdowns rushing, 138 yards on the ground. Also chipped in 8 catches for 50 yards. And if that wasn't enough, my man's even completed an 18-yard pass out there. So, Dwain, it really is one of those things where we saw him have that, 4 touchdown performance a couple years ago. And guy almost did it again. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that you'll get this again this year, but I mean, if you look at Taysom over the last 3 games, Ian, he's given you 21.5 PPR points per game, 14, 6, and 41.5. And like you talked about last week, yes, there was a key hold that was part of a touchdown that got nullified. But again, you had another long touchdown call back last weekend. So that might not have been a 6-point game, right? That could have been more like an 18, 19 fantasy point outing. But here's the main thing. 49% of the snaps over that 3-game period, 17% of the team's rushing attempts, and 22% of the targets on nearly a 60% route participation. So he's been the number 1 targeted Saint over that period of time. So as long as we don't have Chris Olave back, and we'll see what's going to happen, he's been on IR now for 2 games, with the concussion stuff. We don't know if we're going to see him or not the rest of the way, but they don't really have another answer. So it's like him and Kamara, like that's the whole Saints offense. So as long as we don't have, the return of Olave, I do think we're looking at a mid-range tight end 1 that can give you these massive high-end tight end 1, spike weeks. I think in the weeks where it doesn't work out, even in those bad games, Ian, you're still probably looking at a guy that was like a high-end tight end 2. It's not going to completely kill you, just getting enough opportunities all the way around. We'll see if they keep giving him the passing opportunities after the pick today, but obviously passing is something that Taysom has done in the past, not as much this year.
Had the pick and lost a fumble as well, and it just didn't matter. So really did make the most out of those opportunities, as you could imagine. 5 missed tackles forced on just 7 carries. So was the perfect storm. You mentioned Olave being out. We also had Jamal Williams out, and Kendre Miller remains on IR. So we'll probably at least see the running backs get healthier following, the Saints week 12 bye here. But I'm with you, man. At a minimum, I mean, I don't think we would have Taysom ranked below tight end 6, tight end 7 in a lot of these future weeks, which is about where we had him going into.
Puts him ahead of guys like Pitts, Kraft. He's squarely ahead of those guys now. Like you're starting him over all those until the Saints get healthier on offense for sure.
Really just going to be that top group of, again, your Bowers, your Kelce's, more weeks than not, Kittles and McBride's, the usual suspects there in the top. So awesome game from Taysom. Also our, planet Earth wide receiver 1, Dwain Marquez Valdes-Scantling, 87 more yards and a touchdown, has the 4th most receiving yards in the NFL over these last 2 weeks. So this was a little bit more fluky. It was a 71-yard catch and run on a short curl where you pretty much
blown coverage with no one wanting to tackle anybody. Jesus. What was up with the Browns today? There was a lot of that. They didn't want to tackle Taysom either. I mean, the Browns did not show up on D today at all.
Coming off a bye, man, safe to say didn't exactly get that spirit back in it. A lot of wind sprints going on there. So just for the people listening, Dwain, would you like to tell them that no, we should not expect MVS's success to continue?
No, we shouldn't. And look, we have seen these sort of games from MVS. You just historically haven't gotten them back to back. But you had a 14% target share today. You're going to want a player getting more than that. I will say that the Saints do a nice job, Ian, of scheming up like the deeper looks for him. And Derek Carr's been pretty good at those this year. He was hitting those to Rashid Shaheed. So not saying he couldn't come through with a big touchdown here or there, but you're going to have a lot of bust games with this sort of profile, just not getting enough targets. I will say, today, 87% route participation. You had Mason Tipton was a healthy scratch. So that was really his other main competition for routes. And now that guy's not getting any playing time. So MVS is the guy out here getting the most routes. So I would say, like, even if he stayed on a hot streak, it would be hard to ever get him like above being boom bust wide receiver 4. I'm still calling him a boom bust wide receiver 5. We have seen 2 booms in a row, but we could easily see like 3 busts in a row.
Derek Carr, another nice game, 248 yards and 2 touchdowns. Again, has the bye next week. Look, we're not going to be ranking Carr as a top 10 quarterback, but I will say, guys, make sure you're staying ahead of that week 14 bye. That's going to be brutal. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of fantasy playoff implications on the line. And Carr does have a reasonable matchup there against the New York Football Giants. So just from that perspective on the streaming map, maybe you could, take a look there, particularly in some leagues where you have people rostering.
Yeah, you won't have Lamar Jackson, Bo Nix,
Daniels,
DJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, who we're now excited about again, Drake May, and who else? Jaden Daniels.
Yeah. So really,
I mean, Daniels and Lamar obviously have been starting for people every single week.
And I would like to think that there's going to be guys like Drake May or Russell Wilson who you can feel a little bit better about. But then again, Dwayne, you know how some of these leagues are. Some rosters have 3 quarterbacks on the squad already. So beggars can't always be choosers. Maybe keep an eye on DC. Over with the Browns, 395 big ones and 2 touchdowns for Jameis Winston. Didn't even get the back-breaking turnovers, Dwayne. I think the Browns field goal kicker took care of that on his own. My God, man, Dustin Hopkins, he missed a 50-plus yarder. Okay, whatever. I can never remember, Dwayne, a kicker being paid money to kick a football, missing a 32 and a 27-yard field goal within 5 minutes of each other. My goodness, man, that is embarrassing. But again, otherwise on the Browns passing game, at least a lot to like here. I already mentioned Jameis's numbers. Huge explosion though to Jerry Jeudy, $142 and an 89-yard touchdown in the first half where, man, he just won in man-on-man coverage and didn't have safety help. And guess what? When that happens, guess what? There's no one else to stop him before getting into the end zone. Elijah Moore also 66 yards and a touchdown. David Njoku, 81 yards and 9 catches. I mean, Cedric Tillman, Dwayne, still ended up having 7.7 PPR points. Not ideal. I get it. But all of a sudden, are we looking at all 3 of these wide receivers and David Njoku as long as Jameis keeps starting as basically, recommended starts?
Yeah, I mean, if we zoom out and we look at the 3 games for Jameis, number 1, let's talk about him. He's giving you 21 fantasy points per game with 24, 12, and then 27 today. I mean, so the dude has definitely had the big booms. He's going to be a little bit boom busty. We know that with Jameis. He can bottom out at any time, but that makes him a borderline QB1, Ian, and you know that he can give you that high-end QB1 upside. Now, let's talk about his weapons. The best guy over that stretch overall has been Cedric Tillman at 18.7 fantasy points per game with a 21% target share. But now right behind him, coming off that big game you just talked about with Jerry Jeudy, sitting at 17.8 PPR points per game over that 3-game stretch is Mr. Jerry Jeudy. He has a 23% target share, slightly ahead of Tillman, now leading the team over that span. And then you have David Njoku at 14.7 PPR points per game, Ian. So that's putting him right there, knocking on that high-end tight end 1 range. He has a 17% target share. So he's the guy with the lowest targets here, but he is still coming through in the box score. And then Elijah Moore is probably the biggest surprise, Ian. We've already really liked Tillman. You've been talking about Jeudy probably being due here for a couple of weeks, but Elijah Moore averaging 13.6 PPR points per game with a 22% target share. So yeah, I think you're looking at Jerry Jeudy, boom bust wide receiver 3, Cedric Tillman, we've already been treating as a wide receiver 2. And then I think the question is like Elijah Moore, like he's probably a wide receiver 4 in our ranks most weeks, but I wouldn't be able to argue against anyone that says Elijah Moore as a wide receiver 3. So I'm going to say like borderline wide receiver 3. Obviously Njoku, he's a top 6 tight end.
Just going to be tough to push up Elijah in a good matchup because we aren't getting many more good matchups, Dwayne. Steelers, Broncos, Steelers, and Chiefs over these next 4 weeks. Hey, as long as they let Jameis go full Jameis, man, I think they're going to have enough volume to still make some good things happen. We saw that, before their bye when Tillman's catching a touchdown with 20 seconds left on the clock. So always going to have those opportunities. And accordingly, even in a game where Jameis had 395 passing yards, Dwayne, so much meat was left on the bone. Each of Elijah Moore, Cedric Tillman, and Jerry Jeudy ended up being top 6 in unrealized air yards on the week, which is just a crazy thing to fathom. When, again, they also had real good games in terms of realized yards. So great stuff there. And yeah, now over these 3 games with Jameis, Jeudy leading the way with 30 targets, Elijah right there at 29, though, Tillman with 28, and Njoku 23. So 4-pronged attack, a lot of fun to watch. Great day to be appreciating this Browns passing game. Not so much on the ground, Dwayne. We did get improved efficiency from Nick Chubb, but just 11 carries for 50 scoreless yards. And I think it shows that even if there are going to be potentially better days ahead, manages to fall into the end zone once or twice from close distance really is tough, man, when we're not getting that pass down work.
Yeah, Jerome Ford getting pretty much all the passing down work. Ian, 58% route participation versus only 16% for Nick Chubb. So you've really got to thread the needle here. You need the game script to work out exactly in your favor. You just talked about some of those matchups coming up. I'm not as scared of the Steelers in the pass game. They did a nice job against the Ravens. We'll get to that one here next. But I'm very, they do worry me, against the run. So do the Chiefs. They've been the toughest matchup for running backs. James Cook got 2 touchdowns today, but he didn't do very much other than that. So that's going to be another tough matchup. So when you look at the schedule, it's hard to imagine probably having Nick Chubb as more than anything higher than a mid-range running back 3 in any of the next 3 to 4 matchups for the Browns. So not an ideal situation. I will say James Ford does clearly look like the number 2 on the team at this point. Did some nice things earlier this year, had an injury. We missed him for a while. So if he's sitting on the wire and you're looking for someone, to potentially, have as a handcuff, also gives you a little bit of value as a PPR kind of guy, getting out there, catching some balls in these bad game scripts. Jerome Ford is the name to have as the number 2 back in Cleveland.
We were okay with this matchup. We love this spot, and Nick Chubb still wasn't cracking any of our consensus rankers top 20. So yeah, again, probably not going to see better week rankings moving forward, especially Dwayne with the Browns losing another offensive lineman, starting tackle Dwain Jones, season-ending ankle injury. So very much sucks to see that get better soon to the former Ohio State Buckeye. Sticking in the AFC North, we had the Steelers take down the Ravens 18-16. Pittsburgh closed as 3-point dogs, got that W outright under Dig Cash at 48. So got a little bit overzealous, maybe expecting a shootout between these teams. Ended up being a bit more of that, 2009, 2010 throwback edition between them, with some good defense being played throughout the 4 quarters. Notably, though, Russell Wilson, maybe didn't need great defense to have that interception thrown. Boneheaded mistake in the red zone. Still threw for 205 yards, but took the 4 sacks. And I think, Dwayne, we did see, again, some of the lower end potential outcomes of the Russell Wilson experience. The moon balls are great when they're coming down with them, but again, living so heavily on some of the more volatile downfield contested catch situations, we were bound for a performance like this. That said, when you have your entire passing game continuing to flow through pretty much one man, that being George Pickens, we can still at least get some usable fantasy goodness out of the clear-cut number 1 wide receiver in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, for sure. Real quick on Wilson, just zoom. It was terrible. He gave you 6.3 fantasy points today.
Yeah.
This is a guy that I think across all of our rankers, and I was one of the ones the highest, we had him inside the top 12. So big time. Sorry, guys. But look, it was a great matchup. Everybody's crushed the Ravens. We didn't get that, to your point, Ian. This does sometimes happen in those division matchups, and that's what we saw today. But if you zoom out, Russ still over his 4 starts, averaging 236 passing yards per game with 2 passing touchdowns. So that's still above the league average this year, this day and age, in the year 2024. Now, quarterbacks have been improving over the last several weeks, in that department, but still not terrible. The 2 passing touchdowns per game is great. Today was an absolute just stinker dud, and it sucks that it came at a time when we finally endorsed him inside our top 12. You mentioned Pickens. Yeah, even though it didn't go well, 16.9 fantasy points for him, 100% route participation. Nice job, Arthur Smith. We'll just give a slow golf clap for Arthur Smith, letting this dude play. Gives him a 38% target share, Ian, 73% of the team's air yards. Yeah, George Pickens continues to vibe with Mr. Russell Wilson, even though Wilson didn't have a huge day.
Continues to crack me up that I'm sure if you Twitter search George Pickens, you're not really going to see any of his catches. It's going to be him making fun of an injured Ravens player nearly starting a fight on another play. And Dwayne having one of the most ridiculous, incomplete catches ever. He was trying to get out of bounds, but he was freaking 3-4 feet off the sideline and then ended up stepping out of bounds with his foot before he could get both inbounds. So again, still very much an awesome player. You mentioned the numbers, and he really is underrated after the catch as well. Was making a lot of dudes miss out there. But yeah, just wouldn't be the full George Pickens experience.
Took 2 massive hits too and just stayed in the game. Like one time got his knee bent real weird. I was like, oh man, but I was very thankful. He's also obviously a very limber person. My leg would have broke off on that play, but George Pickens, not that man.
Absolutely a dog, as is Najee Harris. Didn't have the most efficient day out there, 63 rushing yards on 18 carries, also chipped in 30 yards on 4 catches, but did force a week high 9 missed tackles on the ground. And Dwain continued to be the lead back, although with Jaylen Warren playing through that back injury, didn't seem like he was especially limited from a utilization standpoint either.
Yeah, nothing really new to add here on the Steelers backfield. Najee had 56% of the carries, 28% to Jaylen Warren. Jaylen Warren didn't have the lead role in the passing game, probably due to the back injury that he was nursing. 32% of the routes today versus 51% for Najee. Cordarrelle Patterson out there for 15% of the snaps. So pretty much what we saw last week, with a little bit less for Jaylen Warren with nursing the back injury.
Short week for the Steelers at the Browns on Thursday Night Football, so I'm sure we'll be talking about that plenty throughout the rest of the week. Over with the Ravens, nearly tied it there at the end. Lamar marched them down, found Zay Flowers for about a 20-yard touchdown on a well-thrown skinny post there at the end. Could not get the 2-point conversion, which interestingly enough didn't even feature Derrick Henry on the field. That said, Henry did extend his touchdown streak to 11 games, and he is now chasing some ghost. Dwain, LaDainian Tomlinson has the longest streak in NFL history at 18, and right now, yes, Henry has scored in every single game of the season. If he keeps that going, he would join O.J. Simpson as the only people to accomplish that feat. So great stuff, again, from King Henry, even if it wasn't a 200-yard performance that maybe we would have hoped for. But more or less, Dwain, just, a typical, I don't want to say typical. We've seen the Ravens putting up bigger numbers before. Usual utilization from the main characters, Lamar and Henry. We'll see better games from them. We get that. What about this tight end room, though? Because Isaiah likely came back from that hamstring injury and did not look any worse for the wear. In fact, wound up leading the team with 75 yards. Are we once again forced to demote Mark Andrews in the ranks?
We are, and that's really the only 2 takeaways here. We've got a complete split for the tight ends. Again, they're sharing playing time. I'm not going to go through all the numbers. They're just sharing, guys. So we can't have either one of them in the tight end 1 conversation. They're borderline tight end 1s. And then the other thing, just a quick check-in here on Deontay Johnson. We are in week 3 of this experiment. Ian, he had 19% of the snaps today. He was out there for 17 with a 17% route participation. So just still not getting involved is really Rashad Bateman as the wide receiver 2 and Nelson Agholor still as the wide receiver 3, at least for now.
Deontay maybe could have had like a 30-yard touchdown early. He dropped it. It was also kind of thrown towards the sideline, so I'm not sure if he could have gotten to 2 feet down. But, Dwain,
I don't think he could have. But
when he dropped the ball down, first, I guess we'll never know. So we'll just call it whatever we want there. Only other note would be, the Ravens lost by 2 points, and Justin Tucker missed 2 field goals. All right, Vikings took down.
I can't believe you didn't lead with that. I'm just so impressed that you were able to hold back on that. I thought that was going to be the lead segment for the Ravens. So nice job by you, Hartitz.
Should have started the whole podcast with it, honestly. All right, Vikings took down the Titans 23-13. Minnesota covered at 6-point faves. The under did cash here at 39.5. So nice bounce back game from Sam Darnold. Had seen a lot of turnovers over the last couple of weeks. Managed to actually have just 1 today, and that was courtesy of a lost fumble. But the 2 touchdowns through the air, 1 each to Jordan Addison and even to Cam Akers. The Addison one was a nice shot and a deep dig that got some nice yak help as well. So good game, Dwain. I think this should silence the kind of Nick Mullins murmurs here as we move forward. Now, next week, they are going to be at the Bears. I don't think we're going to be ranking Darnold as a top 8 quarterback for that or anything. But at a minimum, when Darnold is playing, as well as we did see him today, against a tough Titans defense, we can get more excited about guys like Justin Jefferson, like Jordan Addison, like TJ Hawkinson, albeit Jettas and Hawkinson didn't exactly put their best foot forward today.
Yeah, and Jefferson's averaging 18.1 PPR points per game this year, but he hasn't gone over 24 points all year. We've just not seen the big blow-up game from Jay Jettas. We've seen a very consistent performance. We've seen a very consistent performance. He's leading the team in targets. He's still doing all those things. We just haven't had the blow-up game. Addison was maybe on the way, to a blow up game, Ian, before he got injured, got knocked out of the game late. He had 15.1 PPR points today. It makes sense because finally I didn't try to put a parlay on him of hitting over 40 yards, and he hits it right away in the first half, gets the deep crosser, takes off for the touchdown. So that's just the way that works. The big takeaway here is Hawkinson, route participation came down from where he was last week. We got 60% in that first game. Then it was up to 70% last week. This week it was at 57%. So they're still working this guy back. I still don't think Hawkinson's a guy we're going to move much down the ranks, Ian, but only gave you 3.3 PPR points. It is a reminder, though, the dude is coming back from a late season ACL injury, so they could continue to take a little bit more time to ease him in. The other one big takeaway here, we've got Aaron Jones. Now, Aaron Jones did get hurt in the game last week. He did continue to play. He was on the practice. He was limited this week in practice, so we don't know if this is tied to the injury, but we know he's at least probably still playing through an injury. 55% of the snaps, 47% of the rushing attempts, and 39% route participation. We had Cam Akers get 37% of the snaps, 31% of the attempts, and 35% route participation, and actually outscored Aaron Jones 11.6 to 5.3 in a PPR setting. So you weren't very happy with Aaron Jones. I don't know what we'll see here. They had really locked on to Aaron Jones for about a 4-week period where the dude was getting 70, 80% of the work. So we'll see if they go back to that. We can't really say much about a 1-week sample. I'll just be a little bit more conservative with him whenever I work the projections next week.
I think we even got that one game, Dwayne, where he was north of 90%, and we were just wondering, do we have to start putting him in the top 5 out here? So, not going to overreact to it. He still had 15 carries out there and caught, a pass. So it wasn't like he didn't get any work, but limited, and then practicing full with that rib injury. So until we see that full week of practice, practicing in full or just off the injury report to begin with, which would be ideal, might just need to bump him a little bit down the ranks. And a good reminder that if you do have that extra bench spot, Cam Akers will be the next man up in handcuff town. You did mention the Addison injury. It was just cramps, so we're not worried about that moving forward. But it prevented him from having a bigger day, as did getting absolutely drilled on a potential touchdown. Ended up dropping it. Really, I thought Dwayne was a terrible call. I mean, they called unnecessary roughness for launching, but the defender hit him right in the chest on a 4th and goal play. So Vikings got the ball back. Sam Darnold got his QB sneak rushing touchdown, but unfortunate there. And then Addison also made an acrobatic catch on the sideline. Only got 1 foot down though. But again, just a reminder that he is quite good at football when given the opportunity. Ended up having a week high 96 unrealized air yards. So again, we've seen more games than not this year with Addison being the true second banana behind Jefferson. We're not going to be ranking Addison as his top 24 option or anything, but hey, boomer bust wide receiver 3 certainly seems to be in an offense where we could see a few more booms than busts moving forward. Over with the Titans, Dwayne, another nice game for Will Levis, man. I mean, the first kind of pre-injury section of this year was just one hilarious meme after another, which I appreciated, but his fantasy managers and Calvin Ridley, diehards, certainly didn't. Back-to-back games, though, post-injury, where he has at least proven to be able to throw for, more than 175 yards out there. Yes, a good amount of this one came on a 98-yard touchdown to our one true king, Nick Westbrook-Akini. But as much as that was kind of a risky blitz call by the Vikings, it was a nice pass down the sideline, man. He had to put it in a spot, and he certainly did that. So thoughts on a Titans passing game that, again, even in a tough matchup here, was able to nearly go for 300 yards.
Yeah, I mean, 295 today for Will Levis. You mentioned this was probably his best game. Didn't get to a 60% completion rate, but he was pushing the ball down the field. He's been doing that all year. So I think that's what we're going to continue to see. He was doing that last year as well. So that's good for all of these guys. Nick Akini Westbrook, this is MVS, guys. It's the same. It's the same thing. Look, 98 yards and a touchdown. I'm not going to take that away from the guy. He had two targets and 2 receptions today, though. So it's not like, he's getting a ton of work here. It's still really mostly flowing through. Mr. Calvin Ridley had a 21% target share today, so not quite like what we had seen over the last few weeks where he was up in the 35, 30, 38% range. But yeah, this offense, it's good to see Levis come out and do his thing, because that means that Ridley is a guy that we can continue to, look at as a probably mid-range wide receiver 3 to low-end wide receiver 2, depending on what the matchup looks like each week. The only other thing I would say here about the Titans, Ian, would be the backfield. We did have Tajay Spears leave the game. He had a concussion, so we don't know for sure what this split was going to look like, but we did have less work for Tony Pollard. We also talked about it this week. Wasn't a good matchup. We all had him pushed down our ranks because of the uncertainty of what the role might look like with Spears and just the tough matchup. Only gave it 4.9 PPR points today. He had 9 of the 12 design rushing attempts, but again, we had Tajay Spears leaving that game. I want to say middle of the second quarter, somewhere around there. So we don't really know still what this backfield might look like with both guys available. But a lot of this was just matchup stuff for Pollard that made it really tough. The Vikings are tough against the run.
Going to be really tough to, squeeze Pollard in that top 24 should Spears clear the protocol by next Sunday. But if we do see Spears out, we have seen them willing to fully lean on Pollard with that workhorse role and accordingly would make him a start against the Texans here next week. So as will Ridley. And again, I've mentioned the schedule before, guys, but really does stay nice for this passing game. Texans, Commanders, Jaguars, Bengals, Colts, and the Jaguars again over these next 6 weeks. So giddy up, Calvin Ridley. And maybe, just maybe, guys, we'll get Dwain on the Nick Westbrook-Akini.
Hey, and I have to be fair, he had 6 targets, not 2. He actually tied with Judy today for targets. So that was better than MVS. He did actually have 21% of the targets today.
These guys made touchdowns as Justin Jefferson this year, Dwayne. That's just a fact. Something that we need to live with as a society. So 5 of 15 catches have gone for a touchdown. We'll see if he can keep that rate going and accordingly turn into the best wide receiver in NFL history. All right, guys. The Packers took down the Bears to the, yeah, sorry, Bears fans. That one freaking sucked. 20-19, missed a field goal. Got a field goal blocked, I should say, at the end of regulation after it looked like Caleb Williams put them in a position to win. So Bears did cover as 6-point dogs. The under did cash at 41. And Matt LaFleur is now 11-0 against the Bears. Yikes, man. Also, shout out to the ringer, Steven Ruiz. Great writer over there, but he had an interesting tweet. The Bears would have the 6th seed right now if they just stopped the Washington Hail Mary and actually would have made the game-winning kick against Green Bay. So just one last kick there again to bear down nation. Let's talk about the Packers first, though. Dwain didn't have much volume here, only 17 pass attempts for Jordan Love, but in Jordan Love fashion, made the most out of them, wound up going for 261 yards, 1 touchdown and 1 interception. Also chipped in the go-ahead and eventual game-winning rushing touchdown from the 1-yard line, looking much more mobile in his first game back from the bye, which was good to see. I mean, going through that groin injury, man, there were situations where it seemed like he couldn't even jog down the field when he didn't have the adrenaline during a live play going on. So 150 of those yards did go to Christian Watson. That said, just on 4 targets, Dwain. So can we start getting behind Christian Watson? Did he get the full-time role, or are we still looking at a rotation in the wide receiver room?
I think our big picture takeaways here with the Packers, we'll get to the running game here in a second, but they're still really the same, for the passing game. We like the passing game. You talked about it. There were not a lot of passing attempts today, but Jordan Love, he's got 260 passing yards per game this year, averaging 2 passing touchdowns per game in the games where he's been healthy. So this is a passing offense that we want to be a part of. But it's really hard to predict each week, Ian, where it's going to go to. You just mentioned Christian Watson. He led the way this week with 19 PPR points. He had a 75% route participation. That's one of his highest marks of the year. And he had a 24% target share. So he did get, definitely his best game of the year from a utilization perspective and from a fantasy performance perspective. Then you had Jaden Reed. He gave you 10 fantasy points. He did catch a touchdown, but only 60% route participation, 12% targets. And he's a guy that was due for regression. We liked Jaden Reed. We were never out on Jaden Reed as being a good player, but we always talked about, hey, playing time really hurts, and he never was really just a target earning alpha. So these sort of things happen. And then you've got Tucker Kraft shows up with 0 fantasy points today. He had a 90% route participation, so he's out there plenty, but only a 6% target share. He was another guy that was due for regression. Romeo Doubs didn't have a big game this week, only 30% route participation for Dontavian Wicks. The last time this sort of game happened, and we were like, okay, we can lean to Christian Watson now. It's probably not going to be Dontavian Wicks anymore. The very next game, they were split in their route participation. But I will say Watson had a big game, so maybe that's going to be enough, for him to hold on to this role. But really, my takeaway here is it's just so hard to predict, Ian, which one of these guys is going to go off each week. It's worth trying, because the Packers have a really good passing offense. I mean, I would still rank it as Jaden Reed is the guy we want the most. But after that, it's really tough for me. I think after that, it's Watson, boom bust wide receiver 4, Romeo Doubs, probably boom bust wide receiver 4, maybe a little more floor because we know he's going to have the playing time. Dontavian Wicks is really just a stash wide receiver 6 at this point. You really need an injury to ever feel good about getting him out there. Still earning targets. Tucker Kraft is a boom bust low end tight end 1. So it's all boom bust because the passing offense is so good, but they have all these guys they're trying to feed and they're having to share the ball. So that makes it tough to predict each week.
No one's getting enough centralized volume for us to actually rank them overly high. But,
Yeah.
do we get enough start-sit questions throughout a week? If it is a closer flex decision and one of those players is a Packer, guess what? We're probably going to be trusting the Jordan Love-led offense over, trying to play Nick Westbrook-Akini or someone like that, with all due respect to our GOAT. So, again, not the best game in the passing game. And with Jaden Reed, you said it, man. Just haven't seen the high-end target earning, or just them not throwing the ball, whatever you want to call it, man. Just one game with more than 6 targets this year. Only so much a mere mortal can do with that sort of workload. So the good news was there is one guy getting fed in this offense, and that is Josh Jacobs. 18 carries, 76 yards, and a touchdown on the ground. Also, Dwain chipped in 4 catches for 58 yards for 6 missed tackles on his carries. That was tied for the second most of the week. So that receiving total, especially though, caught my eye because we've seen, Chris Brooks and Emmanuel Wilson almost kind of take that role away from him. Did we get more of a featured workhorse role from Jacobs than what we've seen previously?
Well, he had the 29% target share today. His route participation wasn't way higher than what it's normally been, but you've got really good cornerbacks for the Bears. So I think it was mostly that. I think Jordan Love's basically like, okay, first read's not open. I'm going to be a little bit more willing to just check the ball down underneath to the running back. I will say with Jacobs, and you probably saw several of these as well, Ian, they weren't just all like little dump down swing passes. They were working him down the field a little bit. A lot of the catches came past the line of scrimmage. So that's a positive for him. I don't think this is something that we see stick long term. I think a lot of it had to do with the matchup against the Bears.
Already going to be, doing pretty freaking good this year, Dwain. I'm not sure if he was an RB1 before this week, but with, again, that performance,
going to be 23.4 PPR points today for Jacobs.
We will take that. So 49ers up next. Not exactly an easy matchup, but maybe we see a bit of a shootout between these squads. Could certainly be the case because Packers defense could be at less than 100%. Jair Alexander now dealing with a knee injury, so that we want to keep an eye on as we get in through the week. Over with the Bears, a very nice step forward. I know it sucks they couldn't beat the Packers, and again, as someone who lived in Chicago for over 4 years, Dwain, I know how badly they wanted this specific victory, but at least Caleb Williams got back to looking like the Caleb Williams we saw before the bye. 231 passing yards, several clutch throws, especially on that, what should have been a game-winning drive. And Dwain, we finally saw some of that athleticism put to good use. 70 yards on the ground, some of it scrambling, but also some of the design variety. So just a 1-game sample, of course, but going ahead next week against the Vikings, Dwain, you drinking the Kool-Aid enough to get Caleb back into that kind of mid-tier QB2 conversation?
Nah. But it was a step in the right direction. Look, it's Thomas Brown's first game as the OC. We heard a lot all week, and you hear this is kind of a common narrative we hear when a new OC takes over. We're going to simplify, guys. Well, it's pretty simple. Like, you got 3 good wide receivers. Like, let's just try getting them the ball. But we did see more involvement in the design run game, so that could be a wrinkle that sticks. Season high 4 design rushing attempts for 21 yards, Ian, 49 yards on 5 scrambles. So, I mean, Caleb Williams came through for you in fantasy today with the rushing. Didn't have a touchdown, threw for 231 yards, but at least it didn't stink completely because of what he did on the ground. Now, if he could keep doing that, say he throws for 230 to 240 and he's running for 40 to 50 yards per game, and then we start getting a few passing touchdowns through the air, and that's the next step he takes, like, we could change our mind on Caleb over the course of the next 3 to 4 weeks. So I will say, step in the right direction. Not going to be enough for me to move him up right now because he's been so all over the place. I want to see it again. I think the biggest takeaways here, right, is that's a step in the right direction. There is a reminder. Rome Odunze is a good player. Ian, the dude came out here and he gave you 90% route participation today, but led the team with a 32% target share. So I know we haven't seen it from Rome. It's really kind of, he's been we can't call him a bust because he was one of the rookies you got later in fantasy. Mm-hmm. But if you took him in best ball, like you were taking him around 7 or 8, that still is a bust. But he gave you 12.5 PPR points today. So just a reminder, if Caleb does, start looking better, Rome is a guy that we could like. I still think you would need this offense to consolidate down though, Ian, because similar to what we just talked about with the Packers, there's too many mouths to feed. We still got DJ Moore. We still got Keenan Allen out here getting targets. So today Rome led the way, but Keenan Allen was right behind him, and Cole Kmet kind of got back in on the action as well today. But I think the biggest takeaway is the backfield. Again, first week for a new offensive coordinator, and we did see a downgrade for DeAndre Swift. It could be a 1-week blip, but anytime we have a new coordinator, I think we have to kind of take note of it. Mm-hmm. But this was the largest role that we've seen for Roschon Johnson this year. Now, DeAndre Swift's workload was not bad. He still gave you 16.4 fantasy points today. He had 14 of the 24 rushing attempts for the running backs, which is 58%. But remember, this is a guy, Ian, has been 65, 70%. and we've seen his snaps higher. He had a 49% route participation. That's another number that we've seen higher than that in previous weeks. So it does look like there may be Swift still the lead back, but getting closer to it potentially, not yet, but it could turn into more of a 1A, 1B kind of scenario. So I do think we have to give Swift a slight downgrade right now, and it is an upgrade for Roschon. And then, of course, next week, they'll just go back to completely feeding Swift, and we'll just say we're idiots. But like, I don't want to overreact, but I think we got to just make a small adjustment on these two because we do have a new coordinator.
They are nice compliments to each other. I mean,
They
before
are.
we had the, just famed David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs partnership in Detroit, I'm old enough to remember, Dwayne, when it was Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift, and he was very effective as that more getting the outside runs, getting the short screens in space type of role, which again, when you do look at what Roschon brings to the table, now 5 for 6 on converting carries inside the 5-yard line, and the touchdowns, got another one there today. I mean, they are a nice balance there in Chicago. So they'd have the electric, 39-yard touchdown run by Swift, huge block to spring them, and then made the safety look silly in space. So yeah, he is still capable of doing that. Certainly not going to be jammed in the lineups the same sort of way, though, if we see Roschon that actively eating into things. So
Roschon got both the carries inside the 5, which is a big thing I didn't mention. Like that's something that would really hurt Swift, right? Those are very high leverage opportunities, obviously.
I was going to say, I mean, Roschon, because they're, knock on wood, so far that we haven't gotten this, huge injury news really from around the league. So I would imagine Roschon's probably going to be on a cover of a lot of these waiver wire issues. Would you agree?
Probably. Yeah. Again, having the new coordinator and you get this role coinciding with that, I do think so.
Maybe times could be better in Chicago. Again, 230 passing yards from Caleb Williams, man. That's the third highest. That's the third highest mark of the year, Dwayne. I didn't know it was actually that brutal. I kind of did know it was that brutal, but man, that is brutal. So not saying it's going to be easy to get that going on here moving forward. We got the Vikings, Lions, 49ers, Vikings, and Lions again. But, the Vikings are one of those defenses where we see them swallowed, again, some of the more poorly schemed offenses alive, but some of the better teams can't get some yardage going. So fingers crossed, Caleb and company can keep this up next week in Chicago. Maybe just have some more optimism moving forward, Dwayne. So good news is they did snap their 26 straight touchdownless drive streak. Can't believe that was still a thing we had going on. But yes, we will see what happens in Chicago as we get into week 12 and beyond. Speaking of those Lions, they beat down the Jaguars 52-6. Scorigami, Dwayne, gotta love that first unique 52-6 score in NFL history. So obviously covered as 13.5 point phase, the overcash at 47.5. And per Michael David Smith on Twitter, the Lions outgained the Jaguars by 475 total yards. That was the biggest yardage differential in a game since 1979. So yeah, quite the beatdown. Don't want to say it was particularly unexpected, but either way, man, good to see. Probably the single best offense in the NFL really catch their stride. Jared Goff, 412 yards, 4 touchdowns, perfect 158.3 passer rating. Montgomery found the end zone twice, had 95 total yards. Jahmyr Gibbs went for over 100 total yards and had a touchdown, continuing to look like the fastest man alive. Our one true sun god, Dwayne's overall wide receiver 1 of the week, buck 61 and 2 touchdowns. Even Jameson Williams filling in with our bold prediction, 124 yards and a touchdown. So yeah, Dwayne, Lions are really freaking good, and we found that out again today.
The Lions kick ass. I have nothing to add. Nothing changed about their offense. It looked really good. You didn't have Sam Laporta. I think that helped out JMO a little bit this weekend. Also helped out the running backs a little bit in the passing game. But yeah, they're vibing. They're doing their thing. You have Lions. You're starting them.
It's literally just the 49ers offense over these past few years. Yes, there are going to be some duds because there's only one football to go around from time to time. But if you have these guys, you are starting them with confidence. So at the Colts next week, yeah, we will once again be starting these guys with reckless abandon. Meanwhile, the Jaguars will have a bye to get healthy, and thank God, because the Mac Jones experience has not been very kind to us. Well, we're sitting at now 13 points over these past 2 weeks, probably without Doug Peterson. I mean, maybe I should check Twitter and see if he's been fired since we started, Dwayne. But that's
Did they let him on the plane?
Oh man, certainly seeing the way it was going. Kind of hilarious to make it this like, all right, you need to win as a 14-point road dog without your starting quarterback to save your job. But obviously, again, writing's been on the wall for quite some time. So what did we see though, Dwayne, from Travis Etienne with Tank Bigsby out of the picture here?
Yeah, massive workload today. I mean, he only gave you 6.4 PPR points, but 75% of the snaps, Ian, 71% of the rushing attempts, 65% route participation. So you didn't have that pesky Dearness Johnson role, like coming in and stealing away looks. Again, didn't turn out, to give you much in fantasy points, but we kind of expected that. That's a really tough team to run against. The Lions are so tough, and obviously the game script just got way out of hand really, really fast, but ETN did hold on to that passing down job. So we'll see what happens when you get Tank Bigsby back after the bye. My guess is it's still going to be more of a split workload. Maybe Tank Bigsby still taking most of the early down work, ETN filling in on passing downs and, taking some of the early down work as well. We'll have to wait and see. But the big thing is, man, like, they need Trevor Lawrence back. I never thought that I would be so ready to see Trevor Lawrence play football. But yeah, Mac Jones, I kind of, said, they're probably similar. I don't think that Mac Jones is that much worse than T-Law. Well, in this offense, he definitely has been. 111 yards and 138 yards passing over these 2 games, 0 touchdowns, 3 picks. So you just can't use really anybody right now on the Jaguars offense with Mac Jones out there. So we'll see what happens with T-Law. I don't really see why the Jaguars would want to play T-Law other than your usual comment, Ian. Football players play football, especially if they're healthy enough to do it. I'm sure Trevor Lawrence wants to get back out there with his teammates, but man, it's hard to see many reasons why you would want to risk potential further injury to him whenever you know that this season is over. If we did see him, Ian, if we did get T-Law back, Brian Thomas Jr. scored 13.6 fantasy points today, despite them only having 138 passing yards. This is the healthiest he's looked. He had a 97% route participation. So he's playing a full-time load, right? He's playing a full-time workload, 25% target share today, 28% of the air yards. So BTJ, if we did get T-Law back and T-Law was grooving, there's a chance he could still turn into a wide receiver 1 at some point this year. So I think that's the biggest takeaway from this game. Maybe if you squint, you get T-Law back. We really like what BTJ did. Looks like he might be healthy again.
Evan Ingram too. I mean, 14 of 29 pass
Yeah.
attempts were funneled to BTJ and also Evan Ingram. So come on, T-Law. I'm with you, Dwayne. Didn't think we'd be pushing for it this much, but honestly, man, not that dissimilar from what we saw from the other Florida team, the Miami Dolphins this year without Tua. I was like, all right, can we really be that much worse here? And it turns out, yes, we in fact can. So get better, T-Law. Again, Jaguars have that week 12 bye. We'll see if Gabe Davis gets healthy throughout that, dealing with a knee injury. Obviously not going to make too big of a difference in Fantasyland, but just a note. And also the Lions are going to have to, try to reinforce that front 7. They are going to lose linebacker Alex Anzalone for 6 to 8 weeks with a broken forearm. Get better soon, bruh. All right, speaking of those Dolphins, they did beat down the Raiders 34-19, covering with ease at 7.5-point faves. The over did cash here at 43.5. So don't look now, Dwayne, but Tua and company starting to look pretty good again. 288 and 3 touchdowns through the air on 28 of 36 passing. No, I mean, come on, we didn't get anything out of Jalen Waddle. Wow, how could that ever happen at this point? Apparently, the guy is one of the worst wide receivers in the NFL, Dwayne. But between Tyreek Hill, Devon Achane, and yes, even Jonnu Smith, man, sure looks like we now have 3 locked-in starters out of this Dolphins offense.
Yeah, and I mean, we got 288 passing yards. Believe it or not, that's the second highest number for the Dolphins this year. That's how rough it's been. Week 1, Tua threw for 338 yards, but also by far their biggest day as far as passing touchdowns. They had 3 of those today. So yes, it does look like the Dolphins are heating up. We'll see, can they get back in the race? I mean, the Jets are obviously out of it over there. The Patriots, playing better, but they're not winning their games. So, I mean, really, you've just got the Bills sitting there ahead of you that you're looking at and trying to figure out, is there a way that you can catch up or maybe even get a wild card? You're looking for a wild card berth. Let's be honest. The Bills beat the Chiefs today. So, but looking at the Dolphins, to your point, I think the big thing here is Tyreek Hill, bounce back game. Nice for him. Not the huge Tyreek Hill game we're probably all waiting for, but 19.1 PPR points. We will take it this day and age. Tyreek Hill, it's been a while since we've seen him at that level. He had a 23% target share today. And then you mentioned Jonnu Smith. 28.1 fantasy points today, 95% route participation for this man with a 23% target share, tying Tyreek Hill for the team lead over the last 4 games with Tua back healthy. 78% route participation. So right there at that 80% threshold that we're looking for, Ian. 19% target share and a 21% air yard share. Now, a lot of his fantasy points did come in this one, but he is one of those guys we've talked about being a borderline tight end 1. Now that they really have fully committed to him being in a full-time tight end 1 role. The challenge is this is killing Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle is screwed, man. 5.7 fantasy points today. It has not been a good season for him. Today, he only had a 10% target share. We've just seen multiple dud games. I'm almost with Jalen Waddle at this point, Ian. Is it like Jordan Addison? I mean, he's earning more targets than Jordan Addison, and it's hard because we've seen Waddle earn these high-end target shares in the past, so we can't dismiss that. We've never seen that yet from Jordan Addison. But man, it feels like each week I keep giving him the benefit of the doubt. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep him in the wide receiver 3 conversation, but it's getting tougher and tougher and tougher. It really feels more like a wide receiver 4 at this point until he proves otherwise.
I mean, going into this game, he was neck and neck in targets and just even overall fantasy points with Jonnu. And now it's not even going to be close, man. Like, again, that was the assumption that went wrong. We thought this was going to be a passing game. That was 1A Tyreek, 1B Jalen Waddle. And instead, it's really been Tyreek, Achane, and even at this point, man, Jonnu forming this trio at the top. And then it's been Waddle as the odd man out, unfortunately.
And Waddle may work back into being one of the trio. The problem is there's now 4 guys they're spreading across. That's the big thing. You just hit the nail on the head. Historically, it's always been Hill and Waddle. Now it's really across 4 guys instead.
Basically, got to treat Waddle as just a Packers wide receiver, Dwain. I mean, I don't
yes,
think you have hopes
that's perfect.
More targets.
That's actually perfect. Yes, and honestly, Tyreek, even though he came through today, he's not a top 3 guy anymore. Like Tyreek's kind of battling the same thing. So it's been tough. Now I know some of that might be an injury, with Tyreek Hill. So I mean, we're obviously playing Tyreek Hill everywhere we have him, but that's the perfect team to compare them to right now. It looks more like the Packers.
Is Jonnu high enough to the point where we are also putting him ahead of the Kyle Pittses of the world and kind of into that weekly top 8 conversation? I'm not saying Bowers or Kittle or McBride or anything like that, but
I think he's in that tier.
Yeah.
I think, Taysom. I think he's in that tier, man. I think Jonnu's in the same tier as Tucker Kraft. He's earning more targets than Tucker Kraft. He's in the same tier probably as Kyle Pitts. Like all the guys that are like that. Yes, I think he's right there in that range. So what we would probably call like a low end tight end 1, but he can give you these boom games, which we obviously just saw.
Always funny, man. Again, I love how much Jonnu Smith I drafted this summer, but it was always just like, all right, hopefully we'll get 3 or 4 targets here and there. We'll make the most out of them. Didn't exactly have Jonnu, kicking Jalen Waddle out of his spot as number 2 target on the bingo card, Dwain. But hey, that's life in the big city sometimes. So good thing is we do have concentrated volume 2, 1
yes,
and that is Dwain Achane. 17 more carries, 73 yards on the ground with a touchdown. Also caught 4 passes for 32 yards. Almost had a second touchdown. Dwain got stopped just short of the goal line. So just more goodness from Achane, who has really separated himself from both Raheem Mostert and Jalen Wright at this point.
Yeah, man. Over the last 2 games, 66% of the snaps, 62% of the team's rushing attempts with a 14% target share. So guys, just remember this. Remember all the debate. And sometimes these things go the other way, but all the debate this preseason, Ian, of they'll never give Achane the full-time role. Oh, he'll just get hurt. Look what's happening, guys. You have to know that these sort of things can't happen. Don't think that exactly the way it's going to turn out. You want good players like Achane on your fantasy team. And here we are with a guy that everyone said there's no way he can handle this sort of workload, and he's doing it. He's in as good of a role as there is in fantasy football, and he's a great player. Honestly, the biggest letdown for Achane is we're not seeing the huge efficiency still. Like we started to see it a couple weeks ago, but these last 2 games has been really more of a volume kind of thing. And I know that's immediately people, see, you can't handle the workload. You can't handle the workload. So I get it, guys. But again, just never assume that we really know what these coaches are going to do. We did have Raheem Mostert leave this game for a little bit. Just another reminder about Mr. Jalen Wright, Ian. I know you've been doing that PSA pretty much every week, pounding the table for Wright.
Devin Achane now with Tua under center, guys. He's been the PPR RB3, RB2, 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 RB25, and I'm assuming Dwain another top 10 performance here with that near 20-point boom in this one. Over with the Raiders, it's Brock Bowers, and that's it. But hey, it's still Brock Bowers, Dwain, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, look, 31.3 fantasy points today for Mr. Brock Bowers, 92% route participation, 41% freaking target. Yes, I said freaking target share. That's amazing. 43% of the air yards. You don't see tight ends getting all the air yards. So since in games without Devontae Adams this year, I won't just say since Devontae left because Devontae got hurt, then he was traded, 17.4 PPR points per game. Guys, that is a wide receiver 1. That's what you're getting right now from Brock Bowers. in a passing game that is anemic. Now today, Gardner did his thing, 282 yards, a lot of it, coming in, kind of clean up time, mop up duty, whatever you want to call it, garbage time. That's the word I'm looking for. He threw 2 touchdowns, through 1 pick. So there was enough yards to go around today, but man, 85% route participation in all those games without Devontae Adams and a 30% target share. This is elite stuff. This is the number 1 tight end overall of the future. Probably for the next 6, 7, 8 years, guys. So if you've got Brock Bowers, especially in a dynasty, man, you should be feeling absolutely elated.
Basically, I think we're finding out, not to say he's George Kittle good yet, but it's basically a George Kittle level talent actually getting the 150 plus targets per year that we were hoping for. So still dangerous after the catch. I'm surprised he's still, I guess on 16 targets, man, you don't need him to be that far down the field to rack up that many air yards. Cause I tweeted out his next gen stats kind of route tree. I don't think he had a target thrown more than 10 yards downfield, which Dwain is also maybe helping explain why he's been able to persist as well as he has in this, as you said it, anemic passing attack. Guys like Njoku, Evan Ingram, and now Brock Bowers, man, we almost don't want the higher ADOT at tight end, particularly in full PPR scoring. I shouldn't say we don't want it, but it certainly helps shield against, bad quarterback play. Yeah,
and most tight ends, this is more the role they play. They typically are playing underneath the coverage. Some of them get more of an intermediate type target tree. It has hurt Kyle Pitts in the past when he didn't have a quarterback that could make those throws, because that is something that happens, right? So the lower quality quarterback you have, the more they're going to struggle the further that the route tree is down the field. So if you have a guy like Kyle Pitts in the past playing with Desmond Ridder, that's that Taylor Heineke, that can be really, really tough. Obviously, Kyle Pitts has struggled these last few games as well, even with Kirk Cousins, but we've had more good than bad this year with Kyle Pitts. So yes, I do think that it can be problematic if you don't have the quarterback, right, that can actually unlock those other areas of the field for you.
Jacoby Myers, bit of a letdown here. Did have a sweet 20-yard rush, wound up being their leading rusher, which is kind of hilarious out there, but only caught 4 passes for 28 yards. Again, we are talking about the Raiders after all. So no, Jacoby not going to be sitting in our top 15 anytime soon, but still a quality wide receiver 3. We should be able to trust in more matchups than not. Maybe not next week, though, against the Broncos. That will be a tough one. Only other notes here, Dwayne, we do have some injuries to both of the starting Raiders running backs, Alexander Madison with an ankle, and then also Zamir White with a quad issue. So I guess Amir Abdullah.
Just give Dylan Laube a chance. There's no way he can be worse than these two dudes. Just give the dude a shot, man. At least we know he can dance if he happens to score a touchdown. Got that going for him. Come on, man. This is terrible. This is the worst running back room in the league.
We have Bowers dancing in the end zone, everyone getting all butthurt over that, which was another storyline. But yeah, man, Amir Abdullah or Dylan Laube, I guess that would be the only next 2 guys up. So we'll see. No reason to believe Madison or, Zamir are actually going to be missing a bunch of time. But guess what, Dwayne? We weren't exactly excited to play him in the first place. So don't think we're going to be feeling too great about the backups again, especially ahead of that tough matchup against the Broncos. Moving right along, we had the Rams take down the Patriots 28-22. Rams did cover as 4-point faves, the overcast here at 42. So really probably the best Matthew Stafford has looked all season. Now, accordingly, you get your weapons back healthy, and that's going to be the case. But man, not 1, not 2, not 3, 4 touchdowns and 295 yards through the air. So whether it was the Puka Nacua diving catch in the left side of the end zone, the skinny post of Cooper Kupp to beat the cover 0, or probably just the best one of the day, man, that 19-yard dime to Colby Parkinson. Matthew Stafford continuing to prove why a lot of the real ball knowers out there, Dwayne, consider him one of the very best quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yeah, Stafford in the 4 games since he's had his weapons back, and remember, in one of those, right, Nacua got, ejected in the first half for the, the phantom punch. It was a real punch, but it was, come on. We've seen guys get to stay in for less than that. But in these 4 games since having those weapons back, averaging 291 passing yards per game, Ian, with 2.5 passing touchdowns, 0.8 picks, over 21 fantasy points per game. So, yes, Stafford has been absolutely balling out with his weapons. He's a borderline QB1. I think pretty much any matchup moving forward, as long as these guys are healthy. And then let's just talk about the receivers real quick. Same stretch of games. I did take out that game that we just talked about with Puka. So in the 3 full games together, since they've been back, Cooper Kupp averaging 19.9 fantasy points per game with a 24% target share. Puka Nacua 20.7 fantasy points per game with a 31% target share. So these are two guys you're very happy to have in your fantasy lineups, as we thought we would be, but it's really consolidated around them. And I think we can just feel good about the fact that, look, you probably have a wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 every week from these two guys. I still slightly lean to Nacua as the one I like the most the rest of the season, but it could be wrong. Like Cooper Kupp could be the dude. Cooper Kupp today, 27% target share at 28.6 fantasy points, 25.3 from Nacua. I mean, you're happy either way.
Honestly, could have even had a third touchdown from 8 yards out. Maybe the only miss of the day from Stafford, just threw it one a little bit too high. But again, otherwise flawless performance. Only other note would be Kyron Williams, 86 scoreless rushing yards. Yeah, honestly, I thought he's looked better the last couple of weeks than he did earlier in the season when he was scoring a lot more fantasy points, getting those short goal line touchdowns. Just wanted to make sure though, are we still seeing that true workhorse role?
Roll looks good. Roll looks great. Blake Corum continues to be the clear-cut number 2 on the team, so he is the handcuff that you want to have. But yes, nothing as far as the role goes that makes us think that this was anything less than, look, sometimes you get all the workload and you don't have a big fantasy day. It happens.
And again, guys, remember with some of these buys, this is the time of the year where people are going to have to start cutting their handcuff running backs, literally out of necessity to get that quarterback, tight end to fill up that bye week. So Blake Corum, Trey Benson, Ray Davis, Tyler Algier, you see any of them on the waiver wire. Braylon Allen's another one. Try to do everything you can to get them if you do have the roster space. Over with the Patriots, Dwayne, another good performance from Drake May. It's not perfect, saw the interception at the end. That was not ideal. Also lost a fumble out there, but still 2 touchdowns through the air, 282 passing yards on 30 of 40 passing. Also gave us 27 rushing yards as well. Continuing to really, have just that ability to force defenses to guard every square inch of the field for better. And let's face it, as a rookie, oftentimes more worse. So that is the Drake May experience. He is going to be on the streaming map next week at the Dolphins. So not the easiest matchup in the world, but when you do have someone running as much as Drake May is, Dwayne, tough to move him that far down the ranks.
Yeah, and look, it's been kind of a weird few weeks because we talked about Drake May having a profile that's like borderline Bo Nix, right? Yep. I mean, he's definitely a little bit below Bo Nix right now, but right there in that same ballpark. But it's been tough to get him like higher than like QB 16 or 17. Just because there's been these other guys like Stafford, right, that have a matchup. They're like, well, I'm playing Matthew Stafford with both of his wide receivers healthy. But I do think as we start to hit some of these other bye weeks with some of these other big name quarterbacks are going to be out, I do think Drake May is going to be a player that you're going to be able to get into your fantasy lineup. Ian, I want to say real quick, like I think the biggest beneficiary, we've already hit on this last week, but it continues to go on, is Ramondre Stevenson. In these last 4 games or in the last 3 games, the guy has a 73% snap share, 60% of the rushing attempts, and a 65% route participation. That's a full-time role. I mean, that's not a bell cow. That's a really good role, but that's near bell cow status for Stevenson. And so Drake May just being able to keep these games within range and keep this offense viable, even though to your point, they're not going to come out and score 40 points per game, but they're always a threat to score 21. That gives Ramondre a chance. Today, he didn't score a touchdown, but he still gave you 12.9 PPR points. That to me is the test of a running back. If they can come out and still give you 10 to 12 fantasy points in a game where they don't score the touchdown, that's really a sign of good things to come, because then when you get the touchdown, you're looking at, those 20 plus fantasy point performances, but when they don't get it, they're not killing you. And that right now is where Ramondre Stevenson continues to move up our ranks. I would say he's a mid-range running back 2 with as well as Drake May is playing. Real quick on the receivers, we did see Kendrick Bourne score 18 fantasy points today, still in a part-time role, which was better than last week. He didn't get a snap. 50% route participation, but only 13% targets. I will say, like, there's no one out here screaming they're the target leader, though. We have seen Kendrick Bourne be pretty good in the past. Not great, but pretty good. Coming off the ACL, maybe starting to warm up. Kayshon Boutte, though, is the guy still leading the team. 98% route participation. The dude's hardly leaving the field. 16% target share, though. He's not getting a ton of targets, Ian, but if you're in a deeper league, Boutte is still a name that could help you on a bye week.
Gotta love Skank Boutte out there. What did we get from Pop Douglas, Dwayne? Because every time I see him, he looks like the best Patriots
he did look
receiver,
good.
But then I look at the route rate and it's never as high as we want it to be.
Yeah, they're just not letting him get out on the field in the 2 wide receiver sets often enough, right? It's just basically having to all come through 11 personnel. So today you saw a 63% route participation for Demario Douglas, like was the leader on the team, targets per route run, 24%. but he's second on the team in targets because he's not getting all the routes that we really need to unlock the fantasy upside. So yeah, I think he's still fine. Like if you're in a deep league, if you're in a skank league and you need someone to like give you a week here or there in a PPR format, I think Demario Douglas could still do that. It's just hard to get too much. It's hard to get excited about a real like upside case scenario with him.
Yeah, exactly. He's basically middle class man's Jaden Reed. And we just talked about some of the issues we get with Jaden Reed out there. So still a great football player. And honestly, man, I have a feeling already, Dwayne, this will be one of our favorite offenses to draft next year once they can hopefully get some reinforcements into that O-line. Because again, Pop Douglas, Ramondre Stevenson, and of course, Drake May, they are flashing. And, I have enjoyed the last few weeks certainly more than the Jacoby Brissett experience early on. So I think that about covers it for the New England Patriots. But we do have some more AFC East goodness to get to. And by goodness, I mean the Jets lost again 28-7 to the Indianapolis Colts. Indy finished as +4 dogs. So yeah, good for them for winning outright. The overcash here at 43. So per formerly PFFs, I think he's with NFL now, but Steve Palazzolo, Aaron Rodgers, Dwayne, now has a worse winning percentage with the Jets than Zach Wilson and Sam Darnold as the starting QB. So that's going to be a yikes right there. But before we get to the Jets, little golf clap for Anthony Richardson.
Yeah.
That was nice, Dwayne. That was really nice.
67% completion rate. We will take it. I mean, he had a couple of other, near big shots, that were just off the fingertips of some guys, one in the end zone. Great catch by Josh Downs to stretch out on one of those plays and just completely leave it all out there.
Dwayne, I was so worried because he got Downs wide open, should have been 30 yards. Probably should have had a lot more if Richardson just put it on him, but that would have just killed the first drive of the game. It was like, really, we missed a wide open receiver on the first drive, but he didn't miss him because Josh Downs is the baller.
Yeah, baller. 19.4 PPR points today from Mr. Josh Downs. But yeah, the big story here is Anthony Richardson went 20 of 30, 272 passing yards. He threw a passing touchdown. Ian, it is possible. 10 carries for 32 yards. 10 of them designed rushing attempts for 32 yards and picked up 2 rushing touchdowns. Not ideal for Mr. Jonathan Taylor whenever Anthony Richardson's stealing both the rushing touchdowns. But yeah, this is what we've talked about with Richardson. We've known that the rushing, ability is there. We've continued to talk about him being a guy that, and I know it's been tough, but like, hey, for the rest of the season, hard to see him not being like a top 12 to top 10 quarterback just because he gets to run the ball so much. And in the games where he does happen to pop off in the passing department, that's where you do get these high-end quarterback one finishes. And that's what happened for him today. He gave you 28.1 PPR fantasy points. So if you happen to have Mr. Anthony Richardson in your fantasy lineup, you were feeling really good about it, Ian. So what are you thinking rest of the way? Just boom bust, low-end QB1? He's still going to have busts. But I think just it's enough to see the upside.
Oh, certainly, man. And again, it was one of those things where I know my 32 facts article, I just had this grid up there where it's kind of showing even just his EPA per drop back and first 5 games of his career. Like he was in the green in 4 of the 5. It was just, he had this horrendous stretch that led to him, of course, getting benched. And so we just hadn't seen a game like this in a while, man. But it's always possible. I mean, it's going to be really tough to keep him out of the top 15, especially with guys on buys. I will say, though, if we get guys like Stafford, like Tua in good matchups, I think I'll probably just take that safety net.
Yeah, it is tough. We've got quarterback play is improving right now in the league, and especially as far as fantasy scoring. We'll see what happens as the weather starts to get cold. It's been pretty mild so far. But yeah, right now we've got quite a few guys that have been moving up the ranks, and you just mentioned 2 key ones with Stafford and with Tua. So yeah, I think it still could be tough, but if you've got AR, at least you know what this upside looks like. And this is just good news for Josh Downs, really a guy that, we thought of as a wide receiver 2 with Joe Flacco. At least now I think we can feel very comfortable about Josh Downs as a wide receiver 3. Again, you're going to get these boom bust type of things. 91% route participation today for Michael Pittman, Ian. He had 29% target share. Now they only give you 9.6 PPR points, but he actually led the team today in targets. So Pittman, a guy that we're probably still looking at more as like borderline wide receiver 3, maybe low end wide receiver 3, but at least you can find a way to say, I might start these guys.
I think Pittman's the 4th best wide receiver on the Colts. Can we say that at this point, Dwayne? He's looked horrendous out there, really all year. I know he's been playing hurt.
He's playing hurt, yeah.
Like how many
but, I
routes
mean,
did AD Mitchell run? He's out there once and he torches
Yeah.
Ahmed Gardner. That's right. We're not allowed
yeah,
to
only
call him saucer.
15% routes today for AD. It was still more to Pierce, who also had a nice catch, down the
Yeah.
sideline that Richardson put on him. So I don't know if he's the fourth best, like, if everybody's healthy, but I think it's pretty fair right now to say that he might be the fourth best.
And it's not even okay. I am being a dickhead too and putting him down. I understand that, but it's almost like a Packers thing. I think all four of the guys are pretty good. You know what I'm saying? Like someone.
And the
has to be
challenge
the fourth
is
best.
we don't feel the same way as we do about Jordan Love as like a weekly 250, 260-yard guy. We know you're still – the thing is, guys, you're still going to get a 150-yard passing game out of Richardson. You're still getting another one of those. So these guys are still – these are very much boom-bust type plays.
Meanwhile, with Jonathan Taylor, sent my helicopter crashing down in flames. I am retiring the helicopter, at least until next week. We'll see what happens. But 60 total yards on 25 touches. Couldn't find the end zone because, again, he had his quarterback vulturing away those scores. But it just sucks, Dwayne, because, I mean, even last week, you saw JT, some of those runs, man. He looked vintage JT. I mean, healthy, finally, just bursting through the hole and everything. He was getting his ankle looked at early, but, man, just tough to see there because it's Jets defense, man. They've been slowing down nobody on the ground, but again, kudos.
They prioritized stopping him today, though. I was seeing quite a bit of that game. Like they were, and the Colts were still running it, but I mean, they were putting defenders in the box. They very clearly, in my opinion, were saying, Anthony Richardson, you're going to have to beat us. And then Richardson had a good passing game, and that got the Jets.
Again, wasn't exactly this clear, perfect performance from start to finish, but back-to-back 70-yard touchdown drives in the fourth quarter from Richardson. Plenty of big-time throws along the way. Really was a promising performance, and just his 11th career start. So easily we forget that. So next week, though, Dwayne, going to be facing the Lions in Indy. Again, this wasn't exactly an easy matchup, although I think at this point we can start to question exactly how hard some of these Jets defenders happen to be playing out there, and we've just seen the defense not exactly be this world-beating unit for quite some time now. So again, against the Lions, feeling better about some of these guys, but I have a hard time believing we're going to be able to rank JT outside the top 12, but would you probably still err on the side of caution again, just given it's going to be a tough matchup?
Yeah, I think JT will end up being a high-end running back too for us this week. Like the volume's there, but the Lions are just a legit, really tough, run defense. They're one of the outlier kind of defenses we really care about. I would say 80% of defenses matchups, we really don't care that much. They're all kind of the same. But then there's like the 10% on each end of the bell curve, like the really tough matchups and the really easy matchups. The Lions against the run are one of those really tough matchups.
Number one this year in havoc rate, which just takes pressure, forced fumbles, pass deflections, basically anything that you might think causes havoc. Yeah, they have been the best at it, even without Aiden Hutchinson. But man, just all the man coverage Aaron Glenn has them run, dude. They just swallow offenses whole and, of course, put them behind with their offense. So we'll see what happens there. But regardless, a very nice step in the right direction for the Colts. Not so much for the Jets, Dwayne. Managed to get 27 points out there. I mean, they didn't get their first down until like 2 or 3 minutes were left in the second quarter. So it was a better performance in the second half where they scored 20 points out there. Rodgers did end up throwing a pair of touchdowns, one to Breece Hall on a check down, the other one to a wide open Kenny Yeboah. Also got Devontae Adams up to 72 yards. Bit of a dud game from Garrett Wilson, just 18 yards on 8 targets. So I think, maybe we can adjust the expectations in terms of we've had Garrett and Devontae, I think, simultaneously in the top 12 in a couple weeks. Maybe drop them down a couple of spots here just because, again, we know we're not exactly getting consistent fireworks out of this group. But when they continue to condense everything basically around these 3 guys, Dwayne, it's really tough to get off them that much.
Yeah, it's disappointing, for the Jets to come out and not be able to do even more. To your point, they did salvage some things in the second half. They ended up putting up enough points, technically, you would think, to win a game with their defense, but that was not the case in this game. But still, like, you just want Aaron Rodgers, man, to come out here and just torch a secondary like this. We've seen a lot of people abuse this secondary for the Colts, and he wasn't able to do that. So that was a letdown. You mentioned it. The offense is still consolidated around all these 3 guys. So Breece gave you 31.1 PPR points today, 85% of the snaps, 85% of the snaps, 80% of the rushing attempts, 73% route participation. So that's basically the role he's gotten, except for like 2 times since Todd Downing has taken over as the OC. So, he's going to get his workload. Just happened to come through. The Colts did happen to let Breece Hall do what we've seen other running backs do to them. So that was good for him. You mentioned the other two receivers. I agree. Probably got to move them down a little bit just because we're concerned. Does Aaron Rodgers really have the ability to raise that ceiling for two pass catchers on a week-to-week basis? It can probably happen occasionally, but can it really be all the time? Probably not. It's sad to say this, but it's kind of like Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers, where it's like, I mean, he's not playing that far off from Gardner Minshew, man. Like, I mean, over the last few games, there was a stretch there with Rodgers where we were like, okay, don't look now, throw him for 230, 250 yards per game. Well, that's not been the case over the last 3 weeks. Not saying he can't get back there. So, yeah, I agree. A little bit of a small downgrade for these guys. Garrett Wilson, you mentioned it, like bad game, 5.8 PPR points, still had a 28% target share, led the team, 100% route participation. So Garrett Wilson's still going to be fine, guys. Just didn't work this week. You know, he gave you that dud.
Jets do have a week 12 bye. Rodgers is going to be turning 41 years old the week after that, and they'll be taking on the Seattle Seahawks, then the Dolphins, then the Jags, and the Rams. So winnable enough schedule, but again, I don't think the offense has exactly earned the benefit of the doubt enough to be overly excited with them moving forward. So Jets, just 3-8 now. Man, that sucks. All right, Dwayne, before we get into the late afternoon slate, I want to give a quick shout out to our friends over at DraftKings. A chill in the air, leaves falling to the ground in football every weekend. That is what fall is all about, and you can make each weekend even more exciting by getting into the action with our partners at DraftKings, the #1 place to bet on touchdowns. And right now, all new customers who bet $5 will instantly get $200 in bonus bets. All you have to do is download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using our promo code FantasyLife. The crown is yours. Again, that's $200 in bonus bets instantly, and you can stay in on the action and use your $200 in bonus bets to bet anytime touchdowns on DraftKings. After all, DraftKings is the place to bet touchdowns. Sports betting is not yet available in your state. Don't worry, you can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have the shot to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use our promo code FantasyLife and bet just $5 on any wager to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code FantasyLife only at DraftKings Sportsbook. The Seahawks took down the 49ers 20-17. They closed as 6-point dogs, won outright. The under did cash, however, at 48.5. Geno Smith almost had his second, late game collapse. It wasn't fully on him the week before necessarily, but yeah, won this one with a rushing touchdown with just about 12 seconds left in the game. So wasn't a picture perfect performance before then. Didn't find the end zone as a passer, but who he did find, Dwayne, was Jackson Smith and Jigba a lot for the second straight game. Wound up leading the way with 11 targets, caught 10 of them for 110 yards against, again, a defense that was hardly a layup. So I know we weren't freaking out after the huge week 9 performance. It was against a Rams defense we didn't overly care about, but man, got the Cardinals up next. JSN, top 20 wide receiver, Dwayne.
Yeah, I mean, 36% target share today with DK Metcalf back in the lineup. That's the big thing we wanted to see. Now, again, his target earning has been fine. The question has been, could we get more of those routes down the field that will unlock some of the big plays? We saw a little bit of that today, Ian, but still most of this was the variety of just catching stuff underneath. He had an 8.5 ADOT today, so really pretty much around where he's been, but he had so many targets, it didn't matter. He had 11 targets on the day, and he caught 10 of those. So 10 receptions in a PPR is a big part of your 21.8 fantasy points, almost 50%. I'm pretty quick at math like that. 29% target share, though, to DK Metcalf. He only gave you 14 fantasy points. But I do think, and we've talked about this before, even before the JSN blow-up game, this offense is consolidated around these two guys in the passing game. So I think that's what you're going to continue to see, whether we talk about JSN as being a low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3. I think it's like he's in that range, right? And I think that there are the games where he gets enough of these targets, and if he comes through with a big play in them, he can give you a wide receiver 1 performance. So 21.8 fantasy points, you like that. I think that's really great. He had a 3.14 yards per route run today, so that was really good for JSN. He's been doing a little bit more from a yak perspective as well, and I think that's the big thing. Either you got to get the targets further down the field, or you got to be more consistent with the yak to unlock these higher end fantasy performances. And so I would say that's the biggest thing for me with JSN over these last 2 games is looking at what he's doing with the yak. And that is definitely, he's got some good momentum in that department. We'll see if he can keep it going.
looking smooth with it, man. That's all we're asking for. Because again, you can look at his profile and you can say he just needed to find the right scheme and all that. But that was my biggest issue with his rookie season. It was just a troubling amount of yak and him just making plays with the football in his hands. Good to see him moving in the right direction there. So Metcalf didn't exactly get shut down, caught 7 of 9 targets in his own right for 70 yards. But yeah, Tyler Lockett, just 3 targets. Finally really is, falling down to that clear third cut option. And I'm sure now that I said that, he'll have 12 more next week. But at least for now, it does seem to be mostly just the DK and JSN show in Seattle. In the backfield, Dwain, we did get 54 yards and a touchdown on the ground from Kenneth Walker. Zach Charbonnet seemingly still very much the true number 2 here.
Yeah. I mean, but nothing new here. I mean, we've got 61% of the carries for Kenneth Walker, 75% of the snaps, 66% route participation. So
Boom.
Kenneth Walker, the clear number 1, Charbonnet, the clear handcuff to this guy. Every once in a while we see Charbonnet pop up with a game where he gets a little more work than this. Right now, he's really just a handcuff. I struggle with having him as higher than anything like a running back 4 in the weekly ranks.
AJ Barner, 15 yards, caught 2 of 4 targets with Noah Fant sidelines. So very, very desperate, tight end if you need it. But yeah, try to find better options there. And then we have the 49ers, just 159 yards, 1 touchdown and 1 INT for Brock Purdy. Did chip in 40 rushing yards and a touchdown, man. He is just such a gritty, sneaky, athletic, gym rat, coach's son, guy you'd want your daughter to date sort of guy out there, Dwain. So again, didn't get an exact boom out there, but you know who he did hook up? Jauan Jennings, the wide receiver 1 in San Fran. I asked you last week, Dwain. I said, how many more of these do we need to rank Jauan ahead of Debo? I'm there. I'm doing it. Are you with me?
He had a 39% target share today. So, I mean, it's pretty tough to not say that. I mean, Debo had 25%, still getting carries in the backfield. So, I know as soon as we do this, it's going to get destroyed. But yes, Jauan Jennings, I mean, he's out here with a 2.68 yards per route run today, 0.69 for Debo. So fine.
So fine. Thank you.
Let's do it just so that we know that Debo is going to now blow up for 30.
We're going to rank Jauan ahead of Debo, and then we're going to attack those Debo props, man. We'll win both ways. We play both sides, so we always come out on top.
I can get down with that.
Really was disappointing from Debo. And again, it's one of these things, man, where he has had a couple plays, man, over these last couple of weeks. And maybe it's just anecdotal. I don't know. But I do feel like the amount of passes where he is actually open and just gets tipped to the line and stuff, there's been some shenanigans going on. I don't think, we tend to overreact these 1 week things. I don't think Debo's all of a sudden dust. More than anything, I think it's just Jauan Jennings really being that good, man, and didn't exactly see it coming. Only had the sports, the 3rd and Dwain and everything going on with that in previous seasons. But man, building up that sample and just looking like a dude out there. So Jauan Jennings, again, team high 11 targets. And that's top 20 stuff, Dwain.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's going to look, this is an offense where we like what we're getting, from a passing yards per game. I know Brock Purdy had a dud today in that department, but I mean, it's the team throwing for over 250 yards per game, closer to like 260 on the season, actually a little bit above that. And so it doesn't really matter that it's a crowded offense. We don't know who's going to get squeezed each week, but the bottom line is you're playing all these guys because they're high-end players playing in an offense that we really like. So it's one of those situations where when someone asks you about a 49er, most of the time your answer is always going to be, yeah, you're playing them.
Yeah. No George Kittle, obviously, with that hamstring injury, so that did help with Jennings. But again, seeing him dominate targets like that with the rookie Pearsall out there, a goose egg on 2 targets, just goes to show you that, yes, certainly does seem like Jauan is the real deal Holyfield. Otherwise, Christian McCaffrey, 23 total touches, ended up clearing 100 total yards. Couldn't find the end zone, Dwain, but still a productive performance. And just at least another data point showing that very much still the CMC show, not a split committee with Jordan Mason at all.
Yeah, nothing to add. CMC and the full CMC role. You love it.
The Broncos took down the Falcons 38-6, easily covering as 2-point favorites. The under did cash at 44.5 due to the Falcons, scoring 6 freaking points out there. So Bo Nix, Dwain, the true just coming out breakout performance, if you will. 307 yards, 4 touchdowns on 28 of 33 passing, 2 carries for 5 yards on the ground. So really seeing them command of the offense. And yes, a lot of it was wide open, but man, if Sean Payton's getting this group of wide receivers that that wide open, dude. I don't think that's necessarily something we should be overly frowning about in fantasy land. So I understand the Falcons, not exactly a juggernaut defense, but also not exactly a defense we've seen get railroaded to this extent each and every week out there. So again, while not trying to completely freak out over the performance, you can see the touchdowns, not, the tightest window throws and everything, but there were some there out there, man. That throw over the middle to Devon Valet, particularly, I think, in the second quarter, true king shit from Bo Nix. So we mentioned earlier, Dwain, Anthony Richardson, where to kind of rank him. I think I take Bo Nix over Anthony Richardson moving forward.
Well, I mean, look, in 2 out of the last 4 games, Bo Nix has cleared 28 fantasy points.
Jeez.
I mean, he did it to the Panthers. He scored 30, and then he scored 29 today against the Falcons. So, I mean, yeah, the dude's absolutely balling. In those games, you got 284 and 307 passing yards. You're going to get some of the opportunities on the ground. So, I mean, look, if you've got that combination of someone that can hit those ceiling games passing and still give you a floor with their rushing attempts, it's typically good for fantasy. So, yeah, I mean, Bo Nix, unless it's a really bad matchup, like, it's going to be hard to keep him out of the top 12, moving forward. And that's hard to say because we just talked about what Stafford's doing right now. Tua is trending up in the right direction. So he's going to be in a tier of guys, right, that are all right there in like that QB 8 to 14 to 15 range. And depending on matchup, like that whole order could just shuffle, right, on a week-to-week basis, depending on the matchups.
I got our guy Wallace's rest of season rankings up right now. And you're right. Top 8, pretty clear. Lamar, Hurts, Allen, Daniels, Burrow, Purdy, Kyler. I don't think we're going to have too many people disagreeing with that. You can put Jordan Love up in that case as well. But man, from there, Mahomes, Baker, Bo, Goff, Geno, Stroud, Darnold, Richardson.
Give me Baker with his weapons. I think it's tough, like, because he's been so good. I feel like we kind of got to lean to Baker. But then again, you could say Stafford's basically been Baker over the last 4 weeks. Yeah, I mean, you're right. That's the group though.
Tua's down there a little bit more. Russ has obviously had some good games. We said some good things about Drake May. I think it's a long tier, man, but if you want to put Bo Nix towards the top of it, I am not going to call you crazy there. So we have seen the rushing numbers dip just a little bit over the past couple of weeks, but I think that's just more because he's been finding so much success through the air. The fact that we know he has that rushing upside in his back pocket if needed, very, very good to have in fantasy land. So going to be at the Raiders next week, man, with 4, I think it's actually 6 teams on bye. Very good chance he's going to be in the top 10 for that one. And as well, I mean, probably not the top 10, but top 20, Dwain. I think he was there this week. Cortland Sutton, he had the 4th most PPR points at the position over the previous 3 weeks. And I know there's a little bit of bye week effery going on and everything with that, but man, 7 catches, 78 yards on 8 targets today. Seems like he's pretty much the only other guy we can trust here. They are continuing to rotate pretty much everyone else, correct?
Yes, Devon Valet. I will really. That's embarrassing. I should figure out how to say the guy's.
We got to work on that one.
Yeah, but Valet, Valet, Art Vandalay, that's what we went with last week. But yeah, it's the second week where he has actually been second on the team in route participation behind Cortland Sutton, so 74%. So it does feel like it's Sutton, and then it's been the rookie. But we also did not have Josh Reynolds, who could be back, so he could kind of make things a little bit more murky. But I kind of lean to the younger guy, right? I kind of like him. So 19% targets per route run. The big storyline here, Ian, is Audric Estime taking over this backfield. Just kidding. 23% of the team's rushing attempts today in a game script where you would have thought, oh man, this is Audric Estime. Like, man, they're out here leading this game. He should be the guy that's out there. He didn't lose a fumble as far as I don't see that he fumbled a ball. He didn't lose a fumble. So they just decided to not play him after giving him the lead role last weekend. It's not that anyone else like clearly took over and just bogarted everything, but Javonte Williams was the number one with a 53% snap share, only 22% for Estime and 13% for Jaleel McLaughlin. So yeah, I don't know. It's a 3-way. Here are the shares for the attempts. Javonte 35%, Estime 23%, Jaleel 15%, 12% to Marvin Mims. Got to get him some carries on the ground. Michael Burton, the fullback, had 8% of the rushing attempts today. And of course, Bo Nix also chipped in with 2 carries. So really a diversified attack on the ground today. And it's really tough to nail down. Javonte was the primary guy on passing downs, 46%. And had a decent day in the receiving game today for Javonte, which we've actually seen from Javonte for about 3 years now. Targets per route run have been pretty good for that guy.
Marvin Mims, man, this is the second straight week he's been getting some of these carries. And there was even a quote, I think, from Sean Payton throughout the week, just speaking about how they like some of the things he can do from the backfield. So I'm looking at it right now. Shout out PFF. He's only played 13 of 14 total snaps, which makes this very tough, Dwayne, but he's getting featured on those snaps. He's actually had 12 total snaps in the backfield over these last 2 weeks. He only had 2 such snaps in weeks 1 through 9 combined. So again, there's nothing we can do with this right now, but we're in plenty of skank leagues. Should he be a deep stash? What if we see this role become full-time?
I mean, it could happen. I kind of struggle to see it because they have these other guys that they like to rotate, and Sean Payton just likes to rotate. Like, so Troy Franklin's working ahead of him. Valet's working ahead of him. You've got Lil, who's kind of big. Jordan Humphrey, he's working ahead of him. So it seems that they do like him as the gadget player, Ian. They do like him as their Mecole Hardman kind of guy. So I don't know. It's maybe it could happen. Like they're getting him touches, but I don't know. I struggle. Sean Payton, man, so hard to predict how he's going to use players. It really is.
I need you to just, again, tell me we're not getting behind Marvin Mims because I always fall for these damn gadgets, Dwayne.
I'm not getting behind Marvin Mims.
All right, just make sure I don't, all right? Because the Khalif Raymonds of the world, I get caught up in it.
I think it's easy. I think it's easy to happen.
I mean, God forbid the missed tackles per touch rate starts getting up there. Don't get me going there. So you mentioned the estimate, Dud, and yeah, not exactly the first time we've seen Sean Payton use his, witchcraft in a negative fashion in the fantasy world. So Javonte was a nice game from him. Had that 14-yard touchdown where he had the whole offensive line helping push him into the end zone. But yeah, unfortunately, even in a nice matchup against the Raiders next week, going to be tough to be too overly confident because we know how volatile this distribution can be during any given week of action. Meanwhile, with the Falcons, they do have a bye week to get healthy, and primarily will need that for one. Darnell Mooney came into this after having an Achilles issue pop up midway through the practice week, and then left this one with a hamstring issue, which I do believe he was also dealing with before. That might have been Kyle Pitts, but Mooney's been playing through the pain. But again, hopefully that bye week gets him back to 100%. Otherwise, Dwayne, I'm just inclined to kind of write this off as sucks.
Yeah.
Had to go to Denver. Kirk Cousins playing outside. Really good defense.
Yeah, nothing to add here. Like everything was really the same, other than the injury that shook things up a little bit. So yeah, I don't have anything to add.
Kyle Pitts, dud. Bijan Robinson, 5-game streak with over 100 total yards, got snapped, probably because I wouldn't shut my mouth about it. So hate to see that, but do love to see a really fun late afternoon game. After everyone was all over social media talking about how bad the NFL product has been, we had the Bills take down the Chiefs 30-21, covering us 2.5-point home favorites. Even got an over to cash here at 47. So Josh Allen doing his best Greg Jennings impression, putting the team on his back, though. 262 passing yards and a touchdown through the air, and then also 55 yards on the ground, including the game-clinching touchdown on a 4th-and-2 conversion late. That, again, just showed that there's not too many players out there like number 17 in Buffalo. So 9-2 Bills. They got their QB1. I know Josh was, I think, the QB5 in terms of fantasy points coming in. Maybe, just maybe, if he keeps running like this, Dwayne, this is now back-to-back games with over 50 rushing yards. Certainly wouldn't be surprised if he can work his way back up into that, top spot next to Lamar Jackson. So great stuff from Josh, and seemed like it was going to be really great stuff from James Cook with a pair of first half touchdowns. Only wound up though with 27 total yards, 14 touches. Still getting that feature rolling, just, didn't have the efficiency we wanted here.
38% of the snaps today, so it was kind of weird.
No.
Ty Johnson had 44%, so I can't really explain what's happening here. I pretty much am going to ride it off, though, Ian. It's a really tough matchup, too. The Chiefs are the toughest matchup for running backs per our DVP tool, where you can look at the fantasy boost. So it basically tells you how many points a defense is giving up to the opponents they face over or under those opponents' average, right? And it takes it across all the opponents they've played. It's like a -8 for running backs, and it's across the whole position, right? Not just running back, each running back, but like for the team's running backs. And so they've just been a really tough matchup. And so you got lucky that he scored the 2 touchdowns a day, because it did save you, and it gave you 19.7 PPR points. Otherwise, it would have been really gross. But Ty Johnson is a guy they've used more in the 2-minute offense when they like to go to their hurry up offense. So my guess is, I don't have that data, they probably used it a lot today against the Chiefs, trying to just kind of use some tempo and do some different things, because the Chiefs defense is legit, probably trying to tire them out. So doubt it'll be a long-term thing. But look, hey, sometimes, you'll take luck. You got your 20 fantasy points out of James Cook. He'll probably be back in his normal role next week.
10 rushing touchdowns now in 10 games for James Cook. Only had 4 in 33 games.
Another one of these examples of, he can never do that. Guys, like, just remember these things. And it's always about the guy. Achane and this dude, we were told, couldn't get carries inside the 5-yard line. Yeah. They're getting carries inside the 5-yard line. And guess what else they're doing? They're scoring touchdowns when they get the touches.
It's also 2024, dude. We see this with the wide receivers. Oh, you can't make it if you don't weigh, 195 pounds. Devonta Smith and Darnell Mooney are like $165 half the time out there. So really is one of these things where I'm with you, man. Don't be so quick to assume these guys, especially good players, man, can't get those bigger roles. And hey, maybe even a similar standpoint and topic for Khalil Shakur. Team high 12 targets, caught 8 of them for 70 yards. What did we see out of this wide receiver room, Dwayne? Because it looked like Amari Cooper was going to be going bonkers early with a pair of nice over-the-shoulder catches, but those wound up being his only 2 snags of the day.
Yeah, it was still, Amari's biggest day, 53% route participation, but only an 8% target share, 13% targets per route run. So obviously still working his way back into the offense. I think the wrist injury obviously is a little bit of a limiting factor, as far as being able to get your timing down with your quarterback. I mean, think about it. These guys go through entire off seasons to get these things down. And then, we expect them to jump onto a new team and then just come out and ball out. And occasionally it does work out that way. But right now with Deontay Johnson, who we know is a good player, with Amari Cooper, who we know is a good player, these are good examples of, it can take some time. Khalil Shakur today, 80% route participation. They still won't give this man, like the full workload, but 32% target share because he had a 33% targets per route run, gave you 15 fantasy points, still mostly of the low ADOT variety as far as his targets go. But yes, he and Josh Allen definitely vibing. Looks like the best weapon on the team. Dawson Knox was second on the team with a 16% target share. We had Dalton Kincaid out for this game. He had an 82% route participation. And then your guy, Ian, 2 weeks in a row, Curtis Samuel out here, 69% route participation for Mr. Samuel. He gave you 16.8 fantasy points today. So he was actually the highest scoring wide receiver over Khalil Shakur for the Buffalo Bills. We did not have Keon Coleman in this one. Again, Amari Cooper still acclimating. So if we get another week, where you don't have Keon, like I think, I don't know how we can go with Samuel, but if you play in a skank league, like he has a name like that we could be talking about.
It was just a turf toe, Dwayne. That's it. What was perfect process by us. No issues there. Just a turf toe, slowed them down. Little pro tip, everyone. That's all you got to do. Find one little, bruise that happened at some point. That's what went wrong with your, preseason darling. But in all seriousness, good to see Curtis out there, getting the reps and making the most out of them. I mean, even the one incomplete target, I think it was actually a miss by Josh Allen, where it would have been a nice little chunk as well. So just doing the sort of things we thought would be good in this offense. And again, even if you don't overly believe in Curtis still, I realize we have a larger sample this year of him not working out, man. He's getting the opportunities with Josh Allen on the field, and lo and behold, good things usually happen with that sort of offense. So Bills will be going into a week 12 bye, but yeah, 9-2. Hell yeah, Bills Mafia. Meanwhile, the Chiefs, 1972 Dolphins are popping that champagne. I mean, how old are they now, man? That's got to be, maybe not the most lit party in the world, but hey, shout out to them. hell of a job getting that done back in the day. But Mahomes, not 1, not 2, but 3 passing touchdowns. This might be another QB1 performance, and that would be the 3rd in a row, Dwayne. So whether it's getting DeAndre Hopkins a bit more acclimated, he had 29 yards on 4 targets in this one, or Xavier Worthy, man, who looked like he was about to go off in the first half before quieting down. I mean, they are finding different avenues to go with the football. Noah Gray had 2 touchdowns, who, by the way, tweeted this out, man. I'm in, maybe 4 or so dynasty leagues, and I've been able to pick him up, I think, off of 3 of those waiver wires. Not saying it's going to work out, but those are so bleak, man, in the dynasty streets. You guys have seen them. So Noah Gray, man, is a Travis Kelce retirement, which doesn't seem like the, least likely possibility in the world from possibly being in that top 12 conversation. So no, we're not going to get this performance again the rest of this year, but just my 2 cents there. But yeah, Dwayne, passing game as a whole, though, moving in the right direction over the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, I think there's a downgrade here, though, and it's just Hopkins. Like, we just don't know what his role is going to be. 54% route participation today in a game where they were trailing for a good chunk of it, and they needed, him to really be a guy that could come through so that they could get back into the game. He only had a 13% target share, 21% targets per route run, not bad. But that's right there in line with what Xavier Worthy did today at 19%. You mentioned it. Xavier Worthy, man, popped off right out of the gate. I think all of his damage came on one drive, actually. I think all of his catches, yards, and his touchdown came on one drive. He had another huge chunk play, and this man just doesn't know where the sideline's at. We've clearly seen this on 3 big plays now this season, that he doesn't understand where the sideline's at. So, Worthy, we know you got it in you. Come on, man. Just get it figured out, because the team definitely needs you. So, nothing else to add here. Travis Kelce didn't have a big day, but like, these sort of things happen. He only had 3 fantasy points today. You mentioned it, Noah Gray, he led the team, 18.3 PPR points, 69% route participation today for Mr. Noah Gray, 77% for Travis Kelce. They are using this multi-tight end stuff a lot more now for the Chiefs, and Noah Gray is the beneficiary.
Yeah, not a big deal for Kelce, unless, of course, he's the reason why my last guillotine team dies. In which case, I'll go to the grocery store and, buy some of his cereal boxes and burn them to a freaking crisp, Dwain. So we'll see. Stay tuned with that one. But you mentioned the Xavier Worthy play. Again, could Mahomes maybe have kept it a little bit in bounds? Sure, but should have at a minimum, man, been 40-plus yards down the sideline. So hate to see that, but was at least good to see some of those shorter, just finding his soft spot in the zone sort of targets before then. Because that would be the thing that I think can help separate him from Mecole Hardman and some of the more, DeAnthony Thomas, Gadgety type receivers that we've seen not work out so much with the Chiefs. So I think just, again, relative to what we've seen over the past few weeks, still an all-in-all good performance from Worthy and company. So last note here would be Kareem Hunt, still in the featured role, at least for now, 14 carries for 60 scoreless yards. But once again, man, still just not looking good. He had his longest run of the year. I think it was like 14 yards or something like that. Might have been 17 yards, excuse me, man, but reminded me of this video, this like dog on a scooter, and then it just kind of falls off the side. Like, he's just not explosive at all, Dwain. All right, can we get Isaiah Pacheco back here already?
Yeah, look, if you were hoping to sell high after one more game with Kareem Hunt, like, it's not going to happen. He had 6 fantasy points, and most people just look at what the fantasy points were the week before. Unless you're like reading the utilization report. So like you mentioned, like, the workload was still there, 14 carries, 82% of the team's rushing attempts. He's getting some of the pass down work again, just didn't come through in the box score. So yeah, I do think once you get Pacheco back, probably see a little bit of a committee between the two at first. But if Pacheco is looking like what he looked earlier this season, Ian, I don't think it'll be long before he takes over the backfield. I will say Pacheco coming back off of that tightrope surgery, right? So, I mean, it's the same thing we had with Mark Andrews last year. And guys, look, Mark Andrews is just now looking like Mark Andrews. I think these guys all react differently to the surgery. So I think it's really tough to say like, oh, that Pacheco, won't look good. I think there's a chance that he does, but obviously you just got to keep it in mind, like, that this could be something where they're really easing him back into a bigger workload, because that's a tough injury.
I think that's about going to wrap us up, Dwayne. We got the Chargers taking to the Bengals right now, 14-6. Will Dissly got a touchdown for our mini
Let's go.
Bye-week streamer squads. We were trusting him, and you're not going to believe this, man. But
that's the sicko, man. We got the
right.
Nix and Dissly on the sicko starts. We'll take it.
Good job by you, my friend. Also, you're not going to believe this, but Quentin
Johnson
missed
the other two.
Quentin Johnson had a 26-yard touchdown where it kind of seemed like the defense lost him in zone coverage. That's so weird, Dwayne. Never seen.
How does this keep happening?
I don't know. It's probably just a good designed offense. You know what? Big, fast guys like Quentin Johnson, man.
Get open.
God only makes so many of those.
I saw Higgins look like he got banged up, so we'll see what happens. They were rubbing on his back over there, so we'll see.
I think McConkey as well, and you'll never guess the 2 players in this game I was hoping to have pull out a home league win, but I will go cry about that on my own, Dwayne, because we are out of here. Check out all the utilization goodness at FantasyLife.com. All of our ranks, we'll have some sheesh going on Tuesday, and otherwise, guys, just the Fantasy Life show here Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. Actually, no, we're recording at 9 these days. We're pubbing closer to noon, so check us out then. Of course, DMAC and myself back here every single Sunday evening. So week 12 on the horizon. Well, we got 3 more weeks basically until that playoff push. Get those minds right, get the bodies right, and let's go win some fantasy football championships. So for Dwayne, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning in to